the easiest way for us to really kind of talk about where we are and where we've been is really to think about us as a broad alliance of states. And so when we look at this big map of individuals that have made a commitment to work on college completion, when you talk about 15 to finish, you can't have that discussion without really honing in on some of our colleagues that are here with us today, all the way over at Hawaii. And I know the Hawaii team is here in the back. They have a breakout session. And, normally when we think of Hawaii, we think of something like this. Everybody's thinking about a nice, warm location. But the Hawaii team for many years has been putting in work. They've been doing some amazing things related to college completion and especially around the development of this 15 to finish effort. And so many of you have seen this logo. It basically was born and birthed out of the work that was being done in Hawaii. And what they showed us was that there is a lot of new information, there's a lot of new data that we should be thinking about related to on-time graduation and on-time completion. And so in your packet, you have a number of different data sheets, and I just want to kind of reference those real quick. But it makes me think about the things that Hawaii helped us see. And so you'll see a couple of different sheets, it's forward and backwards. And so if you don't have a state, so you'll have a national data sheet as well as a state data sheet. If you don't have a state data sheet, that might mean that your state is not yet collecting this particular data. I want to kind of point someone out in the room, and she's in the back. Katie, can you stand up? Katie is our director of research, and so if you have any questions regarding the data or want a little bit of additional assistance in how you can use that data and tease out that data to help a larger effort, Katie's the point person. But I want to reference a few things that are on those sheets. To me, this is one of the biggest things for us to note nationally, as far as the numbers of students that are taking 30 credit hours within their first year. I'm sure most of you have seen the moniker 15 to finish. It's really about 30 credit hours within a year. 15 to finish just sounds sexier, but 30 credit hours in a year is what we're talking about, and there's a number of ways to get there. But even for those students that are not taking 30 credit hours, there are a number of students that are right on the bubble that are taking about 24 credit hours and probably need just one more course per semester to move into on-time status. And then in that data, you see time to degree. So I was visiting some campuses here in the area, and I guarantee you those individuals at a two-year institution that are starting in fall 2016, they are not expecting to graduate in 3.8 years. They are looking for a two-year degree, or if they're at a four-year institution, they're looking at a four-year degree. And as shared earlier, we have been missing that mark considerably across the country. And there's an important conversation in this discussion about our data around equity. And what you see is that the numbers of African American and Latino students are not enrolling in 30 credit hours per year or completing 30 credit hours per year. To me, this is one of the most important pieces of data because this is the largest window of opportunity for us. This is the game. If we close those gaps, we move dramatically our numbers of on-time students toward graduation. So for me, one of the reasons I joined Complete College America was because of the work that I had done on campuses. I spent about 20 years on campuses, coordinating retention and graduation efforts at Georgia State, at Clark Atlanta University. And during that process, I felt like my job was to identify some of these best practices and try to figure out how we implement them and take them to scale. And so as I moved from Georgia State to other institutions, one of the things I will readily admit is that I am a card-carrying skeptic. I need to see the data. I am constantly asking people to prove exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's an important thing and an important place to be because we want to make sure we're doing it right. So as I think about being on a campus and 15 to finish, we had a conversation at one of my institutions, and that discussion was about 15 to finish. And I said, you know what, I've seen the data, I've seen Hawaii stuff, I just don't believe it. We serve a lot of first-generation college students. This doesn't work for everyone. And so I went to new student orientation, and I asked the room of parents and students, I said, how many of you plan to take 12 credit hours this semester? This was at new student orientation. I would say about a tenth of the room raised their hand. And then I asked the question, how many of you plan to graduate within 4 years? Everybody raised their hand. They didn't even know what it took to graduate on time. And as an institution, we weren't telling them. And so at that point, I said, okay, so why don't we do it? So I asked my colleagues, I asked academic advisors, and the first thing that came up was this. Well, that's going to take a lot of money. And I said, well, how much money does it take to create a couple slides in new student orientation, reframe how we're discussing on-time completion? And so we decided to do it, just as a test to see if it would work. And this is what those numbers ended up looking like. The numbers of students just in 1 year moving from 15 credit hours, from 12 credit hours to 15 credit hours, jumped up about 13 percentage points. The next year, almost 66% of our students were attempting 15 credit hours in their first semester. That was exciting to us. We had done some great work. Our advisors were kind of sharing the information with parents and students. In my mind, this is the game. You know what I'm saying? I felt like we were killing it. You know what I'm saying? We were doing what we were supposed to do. Students are enrolling in 15 credit hours. We're moving this thing forward. And at the same time, that then led to, an increase in retention. And even while that was happening, people were kind of like, okay, that's something. And I was like, well, why aren't they getting this? This is so exciting. This is just something we're screaming from the rooftops. And then I decided, you know what, how can I make this a little bit more relevant? And so I started thinking about the dollars and cents. And so I said, okay, what does a 5% increase mean for our institution? And when I said it meant $1.6 million, that conversation changed dramatically. And you saw individuals saying, hey, let's talk about how we can do this 15 to finish thing in our college. And so there are a lot of opportunities to help the bottom line of institutions with regard to 15 to finish. And so as I joined Complete College America, what I have realized is that 15 to finish is not a game changer in isolation. It's directly connected to all of our other game changer strategies. And we'll talk quite a bit about that today. So, you've seen the list of our key game changers. And of course, on-time degree completion is normally included, and so that makes sense to many of us. But when you think about the other strategies, I tend to think of them kind of like the student life cycle. How do you help a student choose their path, start their path, stay on their path, and ultimately graduate? And so as a team, we started kind of laying this out and figuring out where are all these strategies woven in throughout the process of a student starting at the institution and ultimately finishing. And so when I think about things like meta majors and academic maps, if you create the right path, you create a degree map, you create credit caps, within the appropriate authority or governing boards, what you'll see is that that's 15 to finish. Just creating the right academic maps for students puts them on track to graduation. So that's the first part of it. Then when I think about choosing a path, meta majors, helping students think about what career they want to be in. They want to get into that career as quickly as possible. And so even if you're thinking about meta majors, to me, that's 15 to finish. How do I help a student get to this career as quickly as possible? And then when we think about things like starting that path, there are things like co-requisite remediation that are making sure that students don't have a sequence of prerequisites that slow them up. Defaulting them into those academic maps is absolutely critical. And then, of course, having a structured schedule or a block schedule or a predictable schedule, something that enables those students that are working, that have life obligations to be able to manage a full-time load and at the same time be able to go to school and have some predictability in what that looks like. That's 15 to finish. And when we talk about staying on that path and ultimately graduating, milestone courses and being proactive or intrusive in our advising process has to be woven into all of that. I will say that advisors are the center of that college completion effort. And they help students realize it's not just about taking 15, it's about taking the right 15. And so I'm very pleased today to realize that in this room, we have a number of academic advisors, the people that are on the ground doing this work and really will be involved in this discussion about how we move this 15 to finish effort forward. And so I love the fact that NACADA refers to, advising as teaching. Because when you talk about a culture shift, what you're doing is teaching your students what it takes to get there. And so as we talk about this day and what we're trying to do with regard to 15 to finish, our discussions are quite varied, and I'll tell you a little bit about those. But it's really, the easiest way to describe this is really kind of putting the mirror in front of ourselves. We know we are responsible for the students that show up at our doorsteps. That doesn't change. But what we can do as a state, what we can do as institutions to create an environment that encourages, that incentivizes 15 to finish and on-time graduation, that's exactly what we're going to do. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring up, as my panelists start to kind of move up in just a second, the best strategy for on-time completion is making sure that students take the amount of credits that they need to graduate. And so even that is an important part of this discussion. This is part of a New York Times article that was connected to the website NerdWallet. And what they said is one extra year at a public college basically costs a student roughly $18,000, $19,000. That's a lot of money. But then when you think about the opportunity costs, so you're not in the job that you should be in, so you're missing out on salary, and then retirement savings that go along with those things as well, those opportunity costs coupled with that tuition and fees issue, in most cases, 1 year of college actually ends up costing a student over their lifetime almost $150,000 just by not finishing on time. So there's a large economic imperative associated with this. And so as I bring up our panel, one of the things that is absolutely critical, and it makes me think about this picture right here. For many of us, the bar, 12 credit hours, is exactly where we have it set. And many more students could clear that bar with a little bit of encouragement. And we also want to just make sure that we provide them with some opportunities and the information for them to make informed choices. And if we set that bar at 15 credit hours, we think that many more of them can complete it. And so there are a number of institutions, and you guys come on up, that are really setting the bar high. They're setting the bar high. They are focusing on 15 credit hours. They're making sure that students know exactly where it is, and then they're allowing them to make that choice. So as they get settled, and we think about 15 to finish and where it's taking place throughout the country, there are a number of states that have scaled the effort. I think Stan referenced that a little earlier. But there are also a number of institutions that really have taken this and allowed it to go viral. So by our count, there are over 120 plus campuses throughout the country that have launched their own 15 to finish effort, even if they're not in a scale state. And then there are a number 70 plus campuses that have said they're going to do it within the next year. So if you are a state leader and you see institutions within your state, that's a great opportunity for us to go to scale.